to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld, and this program is about the evolution of our body, mind, and spirit. And today, I think we can focus on the body, mind, and spirit, but let's focus on the body with a really great master herbalist, Donny Yance. He has the Madeira Foundation. He's going to be doing a fundraiser in Fairfield, Connecticut on November 22nd. We'll get to that. I'll show the links below. Donny, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Alan. Wonderful to be here with you.
I want to get into your knowledge of herbology and your approach to disease, illness, and aging. Your background is mostly as an herbalist, right?
I'm equally trained as an herbalist and nutritionist, and I go back some 4 decades now in the field of natural medicine. But 30 years ago, I opened up my first clinic, and I do a lot of nutrition. Well, first of all, the approach is called Madeira Care or Madeira Medicine. And so I've developed a whole systems, what I call a unified model of health and healing. So both for health promotion as well as a roadmap to helping people with chronic disease. And so there are 5 toolboxes. The heart of the medicine is botanical or herbal medicine. That's my love. That's what I call the humble medicine in the toolbox. But I'm equally as diverse in wisdom and knowledge as in nutritional medicine. So a second toolbox is nutritional medicine. A third is dietary medicine. A fourth is lifestyle medicine. And the fifth is modern pharmaceutical medicine. And so those are the 5 toolboxes in Madeira Care. Again, it's a united or unified system of medicine, not necessarily just an alternative system, a complementary system. It's really about how you put all the pieces together to get people well and keep them well. And the approach can be used for health optimization or for even, which is my specialty, dealing with advanced cancer patients. And there are 3 main targets in the system. The first is the host, which is the person themselves. How do we maximize innate healing within us, within that and work in union with our own life force? So all systems of medicine have always focused on the life force, which I actually preface with spirit, mind, and body. So you said mind, body, spirit. In the Madeira approach, it's spirit, mind, body. But the host and the objective is to create robustness in the host, to get self-auto-regulation, self-auto-organization to work at the molecular, cellular, and organ system level. The second target is now the microenvironment. And we look at the microenvironment mostly through laboratory tests. In the lens that we use to assess the microenvironment is more modern. It's more laboratory tests, blood work, any other kind of modern technique that we would use. The way that we mostly assess the host is traditional, and it's more subjective, and it requires relationship. We need to know everything about you from your own perspective, as well as the ways that I would want to extrapolate information from you. Now, the third target is the pathology, and the pathology of the cancer or what we would say is the disease state or the illness. And that we mostly assess at a again, molecular, cellular, and organ system level. And again, it's very specific when it comes to oncology, because now we're actually looking at a tumor or the cancer. And so the idea is to strengthen the host, alter the microenvironment to be the most conducive to the health of the host, the least conducive to the disease, and then lastly, to target the disease. It's that 1, 2, 3 step. And that sounds pretty logical, I'm sure, but I believe I'm the only one that has actually developed even that basic conceptual model that I just delivered to you.
I think that is a really great outline of how to change around certain conditions. And the thing I'd like to talk to about first is whether someone's ill or feeling well. How do you develop a robustness What's the ingredients of that?
One way is to understand health in its totality. So we're all, when we're born, our life force begins, and that life force is a governing energy that is very much involved and networked in everything about our health. And so that I think it actually has an intelligence, and that intelligence isn't just something that is built into human life. All living entities, including plants, have that life force. And one of the reasons why we do so well with plant medicines is because we come from the same creator. And we know how to respond rather than control. We know how to modulate. We know how to listen and talk to each other. So when we ingest plants, there's a relationship that takes place. And that's not to say there isn't a role for pharmaceutical drugs, but they're very much mononistic. They're usually blocking something or replacing something. They don't know how to regulate, modulate, or even gently move the body into a state of health. So when we're talking about robustness, one of the best ways is actually to get my last book called Adaptogens in Medical Herbalism, Elite Herbs and Natural Compounds for stress, aging, and chronic disease. And it had just came out a couple of years ago, but it just came out in German. And so this book is all about understanding the life force and working with plants that both work, they're called adaptogens.
Can
And then
you
I work with,
define adaptogens first? Just as what you
sure,
mean.
they're plants that build robustness, improve auto regulation, and auto organization. They are non-specific, normalizing, and non-toxic, and they have a special affinity for working within what we call the HPA axis, which is the neuroendocrine hub. And so it's the reservoir, or what I call in Madeira medicine, the essence. And so when we break the life force down, we have an essence, which is our endocrine health. We have a force, or the vital force, which is our cellular health, how we take all of the food we eat, the air we breathe, and make both energy from that, and then anabolically make healthy cells as well. And then the vital spirit. So the vital spirit is the everlasting energy, connects to the vagus nerve, for example, and it is ultimately the energy that we take with us.
Would you say it's the energy that is essentially us beyond the body?
Yes, it's the energy beyond the body. And for me, one of the ideas to understand purpose in life is to take that spirit, that vital spirit, and understand how that might relate in infinity, and so how do we see what is the purpose of life, and how do we become a light to the world of bringing love and goodness? And so the whole idea of life is to find ways to bring love and goodness to the world, and that spirit is what emanates that. So people, like, for me, I'm Franciscan, so the only thing I've ever done in my life besides work in medicine has been I'm a third order Franciscan. I lived in a Franciscan monastery 3 years, and I'm a musician. So that's been my whole life, and they're all interconnected. There's nothing, being a musician is very useful for how I work in medicine. And of course, being a Franciscan is very important, because the heart in medicine, the heart, which is that spirit, has to access the brain. You cannot think on how to get people well. All of the information goes in the brain, and the heart accesses it. For example, Einstein, one of the brilliant minds of our time, said the spirit is actually, or the intuitive mind is actually the gift, which is the spirit. The intuitive mind is the spirit. The intuitive mind is the gift. The rational mind is the servant. We now have a society that honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. So, a brilliant mind actually said that it's the heart and the spirit that comes first, and that spirit has to access the mind. And so in Madeira medicine, that's the way it is. Yes, we take in tons of data, tons of information. I'm, an expert at reading pathology, expert at understanding all kinds of blood work. And yet, if I just try to use my mind robotically, I'm still not going to be able to understand how to help people. That heart has to now go in and say, well, how do I put all these pieces together? And that's where, you have to be fearless. And again, medicine is all steeped in fear. You have fearful patients, you have fearful doctors, fearful institutions that, they can't deviate from standard of care, what their peers might look like, what the mandate of the hospital says, whether they will be litigated if they deviate one iota. So there's so much fear in medicine. And in Madeira care or Madeira medicine, you got to get rid of fear. You can't help people if there's fear in the way. It all comes from love.
Wow. Would you say you reconstitute your spirit with your creative activity as a musician?
Correct.
What is the interface that you feel between your music and the work that you do?
There are probably levels to that. One is that if I'm a jazz musician, so if you think in terms of how a musician works an ensemble, the mind has all that musical knowledge, but the heart is what plays the music and what feels the music. So it has to, and all aspects of the mind are fired when a jazz musician's performing. There's not one part of the brain not working. And a musician has to be really good at listening inside themselves, but listening to the other musicians around them and improvising and working with them. Oh, the beat's going to go slower. I have to keep adapting myself to what everyone else is saying, and even the audience to a certain extent influences that musician. So when I work with a person, I have to listen to myself. I have to listen to the person I'm with. I have to be attentive to them. I have to figure out what I say, what buttons to press in them to get them kind of inspired because again, the best kind of medicine is one that lends a helping hand with the innate healing capacity that's within all of us. And music is very apropos for medicine in that way.
Yeah, no, there's some quote, because I study Chinese medicine. They say
Oh, sweet.
yeah, I study acupuncture and herbology in Santa Fe, and they say the lowest form of medicine is healing someone. The next form is maintaining wealth, but the highest form is inspiring someone to live. I mean,
correct.
And I think that's what you're talking. Because when we have a purpose, our life force comes online.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So like a fundamental aspect is nourishment. And so that's a word. So so when we look at nourish, we have three different ways that we see nourishment. One is earthly nourishment, which is food and water. The other is celestial nourishment, which is breathing and how we breathe, because we have to oxygenate our bodies. And the third is that spiritual nourishment. And I always say that the things that all humans need is to give love, receive love, and feel a sense of belonging and purpose. If you have those three things.
You're talking about the three treasures, Jing, Qi, and Shen. I mean, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's correct in the way that we're looking at that as part of it. Yeah, so the Shen is that vital spirit, and that the eyes are sort of a way to kind of even see. And one of the components of what I do, and I think that I try to make evident in the world, is that we see less and less eye contact. Everybody's on their device and all of that, and so it's so important to make eye contact and then smile as well. Mother Teresa said, if you want to do something wonderful, just smile more.
Right. No, I like that. Well, let me talk about a specific area. We can get into illness, but I mean, when I look around, you're right. Everybody ages, and it seems though that aging, what I've observed is that the vital life force and the minerals that supply, or whatever you want to call it, the body in youth seem to lessen. So we're getting less, I guess, substance, and the body has to take things from the bones and the hair and the skin in order to keep the vital organs.
Oh, Yeah, Alan, you're exactly right. And so, a basic concept in Madeira care, a fundamental thing is building anabolic health and then building moisture. So, in Chinese medicine, you'd say the kidney yin and the kidney yang. So, the yin sort of represents the elements that keep our bodies moist. Because with aging, we're drying out, we're becoming more brittle and dry, and we're, as you said, becoming more catabolic, which means that the balance of our bodies breaking down is happening at a faster rate in our ability to rebuild. So, a fundamental aspect is using plants. One of the groups of plants we use are rich in compounds in nature called ectosterones. They're not steroids, but they're ectosterones, and or and so those ectosterones have an affinity for all of our endocrine receptors. And again, they gently give them a helping hand. And then we build that essence reservoir, that endocrine reservoir, and that we know that a part of that reservoir has to go inward to keep us healthy, which is that kidney yin or that feminine aspect of health. And another aspect has to go into our outward self, which is more that yang energy, which is anabolic.
But what would be some of those plants that I know you
So,
tell them too?
so the anabolic plants, some of my favorites are going to be some plants that people probably aren't familiar with, but I'll mention Rapuncticum carthamoides, which is also called marrow root, which is the food, the favorite food of the elk, the strong elk. Another one is Arjuna turkestina, which has a compound called turkestina in it, or turkestone. And then in Rapuncticum is these ectozones. And then Cissus quadralaris, which has ketosterones, and those are very good for bone rebuilding. And then there's plants like Epimedium, which is a Chinese herb that is called goat's weed and even called horny goat's weed because it builds that yang energy. That has glycoside called Icarin. Tribulus terresta has protodianesin, another steroidal compound. And it's interesting, the herbs, and then you combine them with primary adaptogens like rhodiola or panax ginseng in Chinese medicine, eleutherococcus, Panis quinquefolius, the American ginseng, Schizandra, which is another Chinese herb. Those are kind of classic adaptogens. So now we have the anabolic plants and the classic adaptogens. And then finally, the herbs that nourish that yin energy are plants like Shataveria, which is asparagus racemosus, which is the wild asparagus plant. That's the most moistening herb, and that's well known in Ayurvedic medicine. But we have Romania, which is a Chinese herb. We have Dioscorea, which is the wild yam root. You know, the yam being so moistening. So I'm always looking. Everyone, as we get a certain age, needs support kind of across the board. But some people, say in middle age, have certain weaknesses and strengths, and it's really easy for people to be attractive to all the things that make them strong. Like if you're kind of more kidney yang, then you want to do kickboxing and lift weights. If you're too yin and yang deficient, you want to do yoga and you don't want to have confrontation with anyone. And so I'm always trying to find to get people to see the opposite of what they might really need. A little bit of that will actually be good for them.
And you sell these on your website, at your clinic.
Yeah, I mean, I have, so we have the Madeira Foundation or the Madeira Center. We have a big clinic here where I am in Ashland, Oregon. We have 3 practitioners. We have a compounding apothecary. We see patients all over the world. We do Skype appointments, phone appointments, and we practice the system of medicine. Also in Madeira, which is a nonprofit, is an education wing. We're building a 2-year academy, accredited academy or school with a professor from Harvard. They've been named Susanna Bookhire that we will open up next September. I've trained over 150 people that have been all over the world. I've also been to Israel and trained their whole integrative staff for an entire week. I work at a hospital in Tel Aviv called Bellinson Hospital. And then we have a research wing that we're doing research with major institutions around the country, from Ohio State, Children's Hospital of Orange County. These are all in oncology. The Medical University of South Carolina, Sinai Hospital, Mercy Hospital. So I'm connected to all these institutions, and that's the foundation, and that's what we're doing the fundraising benefit concert in Fairfield for. And then I have a whole product line called Natura Health Products, which also has a lot of these formulations in them. And that's a professional line. So it's not a line you find in natural food stores because everything in there has been so diluted that there's very, very little mediocre to high quality. So I'm meticulous about every little thing about the herb, how much herb people are getting, what it's combined with. And so I oversee everything. And so Natura Health Products are part of my toolbox that I've created as well.
And you make sure that the source of these herbs are the highest quality.
Yes, yes, yes. I hand select everything.
How do you do that? Do you go to where the herbs are?
Not so much that right now. I did that many, many years ago but I've been in this industry, like I said, 4 decades. So I know who around the world is making high quality. And then I also do third party independent testing on everything as well. But there's probably a half a dozen people that are making really high quality. For example, in our mushroom synergy product, all of the mushrooms come from a company called Namex. We use, they are the highest quality mushroom extracts in the world, hands down, and that's who we use. So I don't need to go and inspect. I know that already. I trust the head of the person at that, like, his integrity. And then we even test things independently of that. And all of the active compounds that need to be present for it to be a good medicine are in there. So
You don't deal with homeopathy at all because they say a good homeopathist will restore the vital force as well.
I'm an herbalist. I do know a good amount of homeopathy. I practice a little bit of the way the eclectic. So I'm a scholar in the systems of medicine. You talked about Chinese medicine. I've studied Chinese medicine. I'm not in a formal way, but and also with Ayurvedic. But what I'm very strong in is the systems of medicine that were born in the United States of America, which there were three. There were three natural systems of medicine. One was called Thomsonianism, the other was called physiomedicalism, and the other one, my favorite, is called eclectic medicine. And then there was homeopathy as well.
Can you define each of those points?
Yes, yes. So Thomsonian was the crude system of medicine. If anyone's ever read the book Back to Eden, Jethro Kloss's book, that's kind of a folkloric kind of medicine. It's not very sophisticated. And truthfully, they used a lot of lobelia and cayenne pepper. Those were like the main things. And so it was more the mom and pop way of doing things. Physiomedicalism was very congruent with, say, Chinese medicine, a very sophisticated approach, but very isolated. And the reason why I love eclectic medicine, just because the word eclectic, the eclectics weren't as tightly wound as the physical medicalist. They were loose, and some of the great eclectic doctors like Finley Ellingwood, John Erie Lloyd, John Scudder, Eli Jones, my big mentor, they believed that word eclectic, like go study every system of medicine and do what's best for your patient. Don't get too bogged down on what your narrow view of things. And so that concept of unitedness, that concept of Madeira. So the word Madeira is the root word of medicine, medicinal. It means to heal and be whole. That's how I use that word. So wholeness and unitedness. And again, I quote Ben Franklin when people ask me, "Oh, should I do this? Should I do that?" I always say, everything in its place, a place for everything. So it's like,
I appreciate your scholarly approach, your historical approach, and your practical approach to medicine, because it seems like you've looked at everything and you're doing the best you can for people who.
Exactly. And I learned a long time ago. So how I got into oncology, I often show people this little ring right here. I don't know, this ring on my finger. So about 28, 30 years ago, I had my first complex cancer patient, and she came to our clinic. And her name was Sinclair Williams, and she had advanced breast cancer. I had, both breasts removed, chest wall dissection, lymph nodes all pulled out, radiation everywhere, massive amounts of different kinds of chemotherapy, nothing that actually worked. And she was so beautiful. I mean, she was in her early 30s, and I got very close to her, which I do. I actually am not afraid to love my patients and intimately involve myself with them, even if it means if they pass, that affects me. I don't mind that. A lot of people are try to not have that be a part of what they do, but for me, I come from the heart, so I have to pour my heart into people. But anyway, Sinclair, we renamed her at our clinic. She was so graceful and beautiful, like an angel. So we gave her the name St. Clair instead of Sinclair. And so when she came to the clinic, everyone would say, St. Clair's here to see you, Donny. So anyway, it was a couple of days after she passed away, her parents came into my clinic and they said, can we see Donny? And I said, sure. And they said, here, here's this ring. Sinclair finished this a couple of days before she died. She wanted you to have it before she passed. And I just said in that moment, I said, not only am I going to dedicate myself to cancer patients, but now I'm going to learn everything I can about that allopathic toolbox so I can converse with any doctor, any researcher. And Alan, every single day of my life, I study 1 to 2 hours a day. I've compiled probably the largest database in medicine of anybody in the world, and I add to it every single day.
Do you think by what you know now, you could have helped her? Of course.
Oh, without a doubt. With what I know now, are you kidding? There's very little that I don't know in the field of oncology as far as like how, what's available and how to make things work. That doesn't mean every single situation can be figured out. Most of the time, the stumbling blocks isn't because there isn't an effective puzzle to put together to get someone well. The business of cancer gets in the way, because if I'm dealing with an aggressive cancer, even if I do all of the right herbs and everything, they still actually need the right kind of drug therapy. See, most people, when they take drugs for cancer, it's not that, people say, oh, I don't want to do chemotherapy, I don't want to do that. It's like, let me figure out if that's appropriate for you, because sometimes the right kind of drug can be very amazing for people. But the way drugs were approved for cancer and the way that toolbox is used isn't close to as optimal as it can be.
Do you also work with Lyme? I'm sure you do. Lyme because
Well, yeah, I'm from Connecticut, so I've lived in Oregon for 20 years. The first lecture I ever did in my life, public lecture, was on Lyme disease. So yes, I do work with Lyme.
I mean, how do you eradicate the spirochetes from that deep system? I mean,
well, herbs are great for that. I mean, you use a lot of the alternatives, what's called the classic eclectic alternatives, what were used to treat syphilis, which is also a spirochete, similar to Lyme disease. And they're very deeply lymphatic, decongesting, because Lyme, even when you use an antibiotic, they develop resistance, and they also embed themselves into tissue that the antibiotic can't get into sometimes. And so you need a lot of lymphatic decongestants. And then I do some diaphoretic herbs too, which get you sweating. So you get in heat, you perspire with the diaphoretics, you take the lymphatics. And I mean, herbally, that's kind of, enzymes are also really good to kind of deal with some of the, again, resistant pathways that happen, in a difficult Lyme situation. So I use enzymes like bromelain and serrapeptase. And so herbs and enzymes are probably, 1 and 2 pillars of what I do. And then again, back to bringing up the life force, using some nutrition, but really herbs are the mainstay when it comes to working with Lyme disease.
Do you ever look at what I call electric medicine? There's these devices, these light machines, these.
Yeah, I'm not a device person. I'm not opposed to it. There are some, I do think there's a place for them, but I'm not attracted to machines and devices in my own practice. I want very little to come between me and the patient. And then I want to be able to really let the herbs shine, which are, every culture since the beginning of time has used herbs. And so every couple of years, some new device comes out that does this. And in another 5 years, we never hear about it again. So that's been going on. Even the eclectics wrote about that 150 years ago, how there were devices for cancer. So I'm not opposed. I really like what's called phytodynamic therapy, which is light therapy. So light boxes and doing light, infrared light, and not in and of itself, but the herbs are photosensitized by the light. So there's a synergy between light, and I like doing heat therapy and hydrotherapy with people. And that's for me, that's the extent. Although I always remain very open-minded, and I don't tell other people, unless I feel something is definitely a scam and not worth it. I usually say, seek out an expert you trust and let me know what happens with that.
So, do you think cancer and other prevalent illnesses are, well, they're epidemic? Is that because of environmental toxins, or what is behind?
I think it's a collective. There's a collective. So we can go all the way from the environment we live in. We can look at the food we ingest. We can look at a lot of the medicine we take as contributing. There's tons of medicine that people think is benign that actually increases the risk of cancer, say proton pump inhibitors.
What is that?
Proton pump inhibitors, 33 million Americans. They're, Nexium, they're antacid pills that people use, and they disrupt the microbiome, the gut, and there is a higher incidence of cancer with certain hypertensive drugs as well. So we look at that, and now we look at the impact of stressors. Lack of sleep is a big one too. Working night shifts, abuse of many things that people do. I'm not going to say alcohol and drugs and cigarettes. I always say the abuse of things. The abuse of anything is problematic. But I think the number one thing is the constant adaptation to the stressful lives people live, and technology is contributing greatly to that. So if you push me up against the wall, I would say that, with a lack of intimacy and a hollowness in people's lives, because that life force we talk about, Alan, keeps adapting so that we can be better in the world, but we're suffering molecularly. All of the things that control epigenetics and all of our cells and our organ systems is saying, I can't do all of it anymore. I can't be efficient at everything. You are demanding all this outpour of energy, so I'm going to suffer in this deep way here and now, hoping that this life you're living is temporary and we can get back to a place of health. So I would say that the impact of all of the accumulative effect of all of the stressors that we're living with is probably at the crust of it.
I mean, this is kind of a silly question, but why aren't you teaching medical students all this?
Well, our school is geared towards medical students, and we hope that once it's up and running and accredited, that we are going to be able to have a medical institution be brave enough to partner with us. I mean, that's a lot to hope for. But so far, of the 150 people that have come and trained with me, I've done week-long trainings up to what's called level 4. So there are practitioners, there are medical doctors, nurses, naturopathic doctors, acupuncturists, and so there's a diversity of different health professionals that have trained with me. And when I went to Israel, I was training right in the hospital. So I do feel, 20 years ago, I thought my calling was to open up a retreat center and have patients come. Now it is to do just what you say, go right to the heart, go right into the system. I've done more lecturing the past 5 years at medical institutions all around the country than I have, at health conferences.
But are they resistant? Because, Western medicine has its
Well,
philosophy.
yeah, I don't like to talk in a general way. People that are naive are afraid, and they put barriers up, and they're very resistant. People that see, the reason why I'm not even a licensed practitioner, the reason why they call me to come into the hospital to lecture, is because they see the impact that I've had on the patients that I work with. So the proof is in the pudding. With Ohio State, we've been trying 7 years to launch a study with stage 4 breast cancer, only to keep having the final IRB board not approve it. And I started out by saying, Alan, that give me your worst patients, give me stage 4 patients that have failed everything. So when we give them lots of herbs, you're not going to worry about what we call the drug herb interaction, which is all theoretical out there, by the way. And still, we get there and we don't quite get over. And we're still pushing, we're changing things, we're trying, but it's a monumental feat because the whole system of research is set up to remove all the variables and study one thing. Give everybody one thing only, the same dosage, and see what impact that has. That is completely against the way that I work with people.
I know it's awful. What you're doing is the medicine of the future. I mean, it really should be. It should be anyway. But getting back to this idea of aging and the loss of fluids and drying up, why does that happen? What can we do? I mean, I guess we can take things, but what is the process of aging in the sense? I mean, internally.
I like to get right to solutions. I mean, all the reasons why we're aging are probably and not living as long. So if we study the blue zones, which are the areas and pockets around the world that people live the healthiest, it's not just aging. There are people now, 80 years old that don't have a quote unquote disease, but they're frail. So a big part of my medicine, when people say, well, Donny, why do I need to take these things? I'm not sick. I said, yes, but when you're 80 and 85 and 90 years old, you're going to thank me because you're going to still be thriving and have a good state of health, while other people, if not ill, are going to be frail. So there's this whole thing called frailty syndrome. So the solutions are to work with the toolboxes, particularly the 4. So I do dietary changes, I do lifestyle, I give people specific kinds of exercises, tell them to go out in nature, walk in the bare feet in the morning dew. I teach people how to breathe. I teach people how to activate their vagus nerve. And all of that is, the preservation of the nervous system is so important. And when you look at the blue zones, they not only don't have the stress, but they also don't react. So if we look, what's the longest living species in the world?
I don't know, trees, you mean? Or
No, animal species, not.
how long? Tortoise, a tortoise, a turtle, or
Yeah, tortoises. So tortoises are the tortoises live about 300 to 400 years old. And one of the things that when studying them, why did they live so long, is that they don't get stressed even when they're very graceful. They're never in a hurry. John Wooden, the great basketball coach of UCLA, said, "Be quick, but never be in a hurry." And that's really important. You can be efficient, you can be quick, but if you feel anxious and hurry, your body's suffering as a result of that. So turtles never are anxious. They are calm entities. And so the more that we can stay and not be impacted, watching the news all the time and getting stressed about this, I said, if you just can focus on bringing love and goodness and control what you can control and try not to worry about anything else and focus on what really matters. So one of the things I do, it may sound bleak and way out there, but I always tell people, I said, meditate on taking your last breath on the planet. Pretend you're on your deathbed and meditate, because you're going to wish you lived your life differently in that moment. So why wait till then? Start doing it now.
right? No, I think that's great. But I'm just curious, what do children and young adults have a reservoir of that?
Yeah, exactly.
That they start to lose, and
Yeah.
maybe due to stress. But what is it that they have that then someone who's frail, older, doesn't have? I mean,
Well, you just said it. They're reservoirs. So we have that reservoir. We're taking from it. We're taking and taking.
what is a reservoir of? What is the substance in the reservoir?
It is that life force energy that's breathed into us at birth, and then it builds and builds, and maybe around age 20 it starts to decline. And that's why really good athletes, even at 30 in some sports, are washed up, because even at 30 that reservoir is not as good as it was at 20. So again, the toolboxes, if you can get people to look at lifestyle, look at dietary changes that actually build that reservoir, start to work with some herbs and nutritional agents that support that, you can have preservation of that reservoir and live a very healthy life to to at least being a centenarian, say.
Of course, less stress, less things that drain the life force. I mean,
Yeah, and stress is a two-way street because we can all go live on a retreat and we'll have less stress, or we can bring the retreat to our lives, and that's what I try to teach. It's like how in a great Eastern Christian mystic called Catherine Doherty wrote a book called Pustinia, which in the word Pustinia is a Russian word which means the desert. So she talks about in that book, no matter where you are, you can be in the middle of a war zone and still not be panicked and know that, God's love is shining within you, and that it's your choice if you want to panic, and but it's always a choice. Everything becomes a choice. So the better we can train ourselves to be less reactive and more responsive, the better off we're going to be.
Yeah. One other discussion about stress is some people say a little stress can be good, like gravity. I mean, you need to work
Yes.
out, and that's stressing yourself.
Oh, that is completely true. So that concept, Alan, is called hormesis.
Okay.
So hormesis is a little bit of something, and that's all kinds of stress, even environmental stress. When people say, I want no lead in my environment, zero mercury, I don't want to have anything with any chemicals. I said, that's actually not the healthiest way. A little bit exposure to toxins activate our defense mechanisms and exercise them and make us more robust and stronger. But too much of them. So there's what's called the dynamic range of healthy stability. Say this, and that range tightens as we get older. But taking adaptogens and herbs re-stretch it out a little bit, and it's a variable range. We're going to have stress, but as long as we don't constantly bump out of it in a more regular way, we can maintain really good health. It's not a stable thing.
Right. All those germophobics should know that.
Oh yeah, you don't want to be like that at all. I just did a big blog on vaccines and talked about not necessarily criticizing them overtly, but I said the impact and cumulative effect of now over 70 vaccines that children are having. What is that doing to the life force of our immune system that needs to be exercised in a more natural way? It's not just, so I took a different stance on what it is. And maybe in another 5 years, they're going to have up to quote unquote 200 vaccines available. So, I just wrote a 3 or 4 page blog on that because, again, that's not, our life force does get stronger by having it be stressed sometimes.
Right. No, I think that's great. I mean, vaccines, that's a whole subject.
Yeah.
It's awful, awful. But one more subject. I know we're have just a few more minutes, but the whole what's in the news and people like Deepak Chopra, Bruce Lipton, they're talking about epigenetics.
Yeah.
That's something. How is epigenetics? Well, as I understand the evolution of cellular structures, or how would you?
Well, epigenetics goes even further than cellular structures. It goes at the molecular level. So it's looking at us, our genetic makeup. And there's two ways you can look. There's epigenomics and epigenetics. So there are two sides of a coin. So one is like our genes, which are often different from our parents and our grandparents, and maybe our ethnicity kind of gives us a certain genetic blueprint. And food and different things we do have a different impact. If you're a Native American Indian, for example, alcohol and refined sugar has a much more negative impact than, say, if you're European. That has to do with the adaptation over time of our genes. And so and then there's the epigenetic component, which is that food and herbs have an impact on stabilizing the genes and mutations we might have been born with, because everything needs to be turned on. If you have an abnormal gene, whether it's a P53 or a BRCA gene or an ATM gene or a CHEK gene or a PTEN gene, you don't get cancer when you're born. They predispose you maybe, but something that driver needs to get in the car and start driving before it's a problem. And so epigenetics are helping to inhibit those types of factors, allowing them to be turned on and dictate, often the triggers to disease. And so,
Epigenetic factor that you would prescribe?
well, herbs are the best. They're the most studied in the world, and a lot of them are culinary herbs. So I have a formula called Botanical Treasures and one called Cell Guardian, and those are kind of the epigenetic guardian formulas. So Botanical Treasures has turmeric extract, a curcumin 3C extract in it. So it has in it green tea extract, grapeseed, resveratrol, rosemary extract, ginger extract, and I don't think I forgot anything. I think that's the formula. And Cell Guardian is rich in what's called isothiocyanates from both broccoli seeds, cabbage sprouts, and wasabi. And those isothiocyanates and the phenolic compounds in those plants, those are the most studied of anything at having positive impact in the world of epigenetics, more than anything else.
So by taking those substances, what actually happens on a cellular level? I know you sort of described, but
Well, what happens is the preservation of our molecular makeup. So we're going to, as every day we fire and make new cells, they're dependent on our, our molecular integrity. If that integrity is now compromised, our cells are now compromised and unhealthy. So, and then those plants are pretty remarkable in that, like, say, isothiocyanates and phenolic compounds can distinguish between cell preservation, so protecting cells from damage, because we're talking about, when we talk about epigenetics, prevention of damage to the cell, and then repair cells that might have been damaged, or the same compounds can actually understand when a cell is past its prime and needs to basically undergo cell death, which is called apoptosis, and actually encourage that cell to die, because part of cancer is evading apoptosis. So cancer cells have learned, on top of everything else, to basically not die. They become immortal cells.
So the body is always turning over cells. So you want to teach the body how to do that, because the vital force, in order to maintain its earthly existence, needs to keep evolving and changing with the flow of time, in a sense.
Yeah, and I've written many blogs on epigenetics, and so my blog page is just my name, Donny, Donnie, Yance, YANCE.com. So DonnyYance.com. I have a lot up on that, as far as both in spirituality. I have a section. I have a section in food as medicine, and I have a section in, of course, things like vaccinations and all kinds of things. It's a treasure. It's my one outreach, and so mostly I'm in the trenches with patients or lecturing in these big institutions or writing. My one outreach to the world is my blog page.
I really appreciate all the work you've done and the passion you have for this. Do you ever associate with people like Dietrich Klinghardt, Linda Lancaster? Do you know those people?
I know them. Yes, I know them. Yep. I've done when Klinghardt used to have conferences up in Seattle, I went and spoke at 2 of them. But he knows me and knows of my work.
No, because there's a lot of people on the leading edge. I think you're one of them that is looking at the really big picture of how to help people. The fundraiser you have coming up, talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So that's going to be held at the Fairfield Theater warehouse in Fairfield, Connecticut. To me, it will be the highlight of my life and our foundation for many, many reasons. But, we're really trying to make a big step out and really launch our foundation to the world and have people to know. So it's featuring, to me, the greatest singer, composer, and musician in the world who is better than ever, over 21 million albums, is Gino Vanelli and his band. So if you don't know Gino's name, you'll recognize a lot of his hit songs from the 70s and all the way through to 81. So that's a treat in and of itself. But along with that is the #1 female jazz singer in the world, Roberta Gambarini, who has actually never sung with Gino. She's going to come and sing a song with Gino. I, who am a musician, am going to open up the night with a 4-piece band of mine doing several of my own compositions, including one called Life Goes On, Heaven Awaits. It's kind of my opus, my spiritual opus. And I'm a bass player, but I play the whole melody on bass, and then later on in unison with the clarinet. And then Jeffrey Gorian, who's Comedy Central, wrote all the material for Steinfeld.
He's a good friend of mine.
Yeah. So Jeffrey's the emceeing it, and
this is his. Yes, Jeffrey's great. Yes.
Yeah. So we have, there's VIP tickets where people get a gourmet feast to sit down. They get catered to. There's not many seats left at that level, but there's also the general seats, which I think the tickets are $175, and even just to see Gino in a prime little intimate setting can cost that much. And so we feel like it's a great deal, but yet it also benefits our cause, which is a really wonderful cause. The theme of it is Together We Heal, because this concept of unity and togetherness, and it's an our approach, not a me approach, is also very much a message I want to disseminate out there. And so it's November 22nd. The doors open at 6. You can go to the Madeira website to get tickets. It's MadeiraFoundation.org. And tickets can be bought right on that front page. And
wow.
And I'm super excited. What could I say?
I want to support that. Everyone come to this concert, support the Madeira Foundation and the work of Donny Yance, because I think you're one of the not few people making a difference, but you're making a difference. And that's and you're doing your life's work and you're helping people. And thank you for your time.
You're so welcome, and thank you for allowing me to be here with you. It's been very special.
It's been great for me, very educational. I'd love to talk to you for a couple of more hours about the depth.
Yeah, and actually, when I go and lecture, the more I talk, the better it is, because there's just there's so much to say. I don't just have a couple of little things to say. We can get right into the trenches and talk about epigenetics or talk about an herb, for example.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Dedication. And I look forward to meeting you in person.
Thank you. Me too.
I'll be in touch, and I'll put this on my YouTube channel, and I'll just promote this event for your foundation.
Thank you so much, Alan. That's really lovely.
Welcome to New Realities. I'm Alan Steinfeld. I'm here with Jeffrey Gorian, the upcoming MC for the Madeira Foundation benefit in Fairfield, Connecticut. So talk about that a little bit and what your role.
It's a very exciting event. It's on Friday, November the 22nd at a place called The Warehouse in Fairfield, Connecticut. It's a 640-seat theater. The Madeira Foundation is in Oregon. I believe it's in Ashland, Oregon, and it was founded by a man named Donny Yance.
Brilliant herbologist, really amazing.
Yes, and he does a lot of work in curing cancer.
Right, with herbs and other modalities.
Yeah, and his work has been accepted. He works with a lot of MDs, a lot of oncologists.
Let's show his book, if you can.
And it's an incredible book. It's called Adaptogens in Medical Herbalism. It's a 600-page book. I'm honored to be the MC. It's an event that's going to be starring Gino Vanelli, pop star and crossover artist.
What's that famous song he did, that famous Gino Vanelli song?
I Don't Want to Stop. I saw him perform recently at the Iridium when he was in New York. He had a killer show. And Roberta Gambarini, who's a Grammy Award-winning nominee artist, will be opening the show. So this is a fundraiser for the Madeira Foundation. If you come to the concert, you'll be contributing to this worldwide phenomena of Donny Yance's work, getting the information out there, supporting the foundation that's helping thousands of people around the world
with this type of medicinal herbology and his adaptogen approach.
It's an evening of healing and healing and entertainment. It'll be laughter because I'm the MC, so I'm going to make it funny. And it'll also be serious, and there'll be people there who Donny has helped, cancer victims who have recovered. It'll be a very interesting crowd, and I hope that you'll come out and join us.
I have to say it's a very important. Donny is one of the most dedicated people I've ever met to helping people heal through any modality possible, and this really supports his foundation. So come to Fairfield, November
22nd, Friday night from 6 to 11, and Madeira is spelled Mederi, and you can get tickets on their website.
And Gino Finelli, that's worth seeing. And actually, Donny is a musician. He's going to be playing.
He'll be playing. He has his own band, and he'll be playing as well. And it'll be a very special event.
Yeah, be great. I'll be there. And of course, our MC, Jeffrey Gurian. Thanks, Jeffrey, for your support of such a good and comedy matters, because comedy matters.
Comedy does matter.
Hi, this is Chelsea Handler, and you're watching Comedy Matters TV.
Hey, this is John Stewart. You're watching Comedy Matters, and it really doesn't, but you're still watching it.
Jeffrey's been with the greats, the near greats, and the would-be greats. Thank you, Jeffrey.
And I'm with you, too. Thank you.
I don't know where I fit into those categories.
Always good to be with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Alan Steinfeld for New Reality. Come to the concert. Thank you.